Hey, welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey, bestie, hope you're having an amazing day. You see what happens when you subscribe? You get a bonus greeting on every episode. On this episode, we talked to Dr. Bettina Palazzo. She is an expert in business ethics from Switzerland. She has so many great frameworks, and she's been in this field for a while. So she's seen a lot of change, and she drives a bunch of thought leadership. So if you're not familiar with her, you are going to absolutely love her, and I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Here I am.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good.
Good to see you. What's happening?
A very active background here. And
thank you very much. How's your day going? Good? Good,
yeah.
Good.
We had a little bit of sun here in Switzerland today, which was rare recently.
It's rare, huh? Yeah. Well, I've been really excited to get you on. You know, you are like the business ethics expert on the other side of the pond. And I followed you on LinkedIn for such a long time. And so great to finally meet you and chat with you and, you know, hear your story.
Yeah, I'm very happy too. And same to you. I mean, I've been following you on LinkedIn forever and I really love your stuff. It's really different and fresh.
Thank you.
Inspiring.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get into this field? How did you go from being a little girl at one point to now being the ethics expert of Europe?
Thank you. This is such an, I'm so flattered by this title. Thank you. I take it. By being a curious girl from the countryside in Bavaria, venturing out into the world. And then by chance, I actually studied American studies. Can you believe it?
Wow.
And I was kind of worried, you know, being a good German woman and a virgin. So you're kind of worried, what will I do myself? And I was looking for a business-friendly topic for my thesis in American studies. And at the time, I was in an internship at Siemens, of all places. And so I shopped around and asked, what do you want me to work on? And I came across this guy who told me, why don't you find out what's going on in business ethics in the US for us? And that's what I did. And I basically never stopped because, so this bridging worlds is keeping me motivated, looking at what's going on in the States. Also, in the beginning, you know, when I started, it was the early 90s. There was very little going on in Germany, and there was more, we still have lots of intercultural misunderstandings. So I really digged into that. Wrote my PhD about this, but I wanted to bring this to the practical world. So I was very happy then when I could directly from my PhD go to KPMG to start getting into consulting, because that's where you learn that stuff.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and there was the theory and the practical bridging in my life. And I'm basically still doing that, right?
Yeah. How crazy is that, though? I mean, imagine you're trying to write this thesis and then you just have this random conversation that sets you on this path that years later you're just continuing to explore.
Yeah.
I mean, that's wild.
Isn't it? It's wild, and even it brought me much more than a profession and work. I also met my husband on a business ethics conference.
Amazing.
And he's a professor for business ethics here in Lausanne University.
Yeah. So tell me this, like, what was it about that topic that really resonated so much with you? Like, there was something about America that you said you wanted to do American studies. I'd love to hear about that. But then when this person suggested understanding business ethics, you kind of dove into it, and it's years later and you're still here. So what was it about this field that really was so interesting to keep your attention for so long?
Yeah, that's a good question. So American studies was just, I was a little bit lost after being a au pair girl in the States in the after school. And so American studies were more or less, I didn't know what else to do, and I had to work out my cultural shock.
Yeah.
And then I was just looking around for interesting topics. And because of this intercultural experience, I first was interested in intercultural management. And then by chance, this topic came up. And being, a little bit a hippie at heart, this kind of resonated with me. I thought, well, yeah, our economic system really sucks. We can't continue like this. So maybe this is something where I can contribute. And it still keeps me energized a lot, especially, and I never quit consulting. I mean, I could have gone into an organization and become an ethics officer, but the consulting thing is again this nice combination of where you suck up new stuff and you bring it into practice and you translate it. Where I have the luxury that I can look around in all kinds of disciplines, from communication, marketing, ethics, leadership, and that's why it never gets boring.
Yeah, it's so much It's so much variety, Yeah,
I mean it's fascinating, right?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you did your thesis, then you moved into KPMG, and now you're doing a bunch of business ethics kind of consulting. Is that right?
Yeah.
So tell me about that practice. Yeah. I'm a KPMG guy too, by the way, and I learned so much working there. So I knew there was something about you. We had some kind of connection. But tell me about that experience, because I found that working in a role like that, you just get to see so much. I did financial due diligence, so I got to see dozens and dozens of different transactions in different parts of the world and different markets. And I got to work with all these smart people, both, as colleagues and, in the target companies that we were analyzing and consulting for. So I feel like, in my 5 years there or whatever, it felt like 10 years of experience. Tell me a little bit about the kind of projects you were working on and how you found that time there to be in terms of like building your skill set or building your toolbox.
Yeah, at KPMG, you mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it was tough at the times. Because before I was working in a philosophy research institute, and I was the most practical person in the room. And then I came to KPMG, and all of a sudden I was the most theoretical person in the room. So this then explained to an auditor why business ethics is important.
Right.
Yeah. So it made me grow a lot.
Right.
And I had to invent it more or less from scratch. So
really?
that's fast track. Yeah, I reached out to the colleagues in the US, and the colleagues in the Netherlands were advanced, but in Germany it was basically nothing. And what was also interesting, because I was part of the Department of Forensic Accounting. So the thinking had been, oh, great. So we already in there when they just had an incident. So then will be super easy to sell the business ethics as a prevention for the not to happen again.
Right.
But at the time, the early 90s, that strategy did not really work, because there had not been the learning years later in 2006 with the big Siemens scandal, where people all of a sudden understood much more about it. So back in the day, it was more, we had an incident. We just get rid of the bad apples. We have nothing to do with it. We are okay. We just want to put some Band-Aid over it, and if it comes up again because the Band-Aid gets infected, never mind.
We'll put another Band-Aid on it. Right.
Yeah. Right. And so what then finally worked so we could have business was finding the right people who already had this understanding that the culture is important, that you need to work to explain to your people where are the gray zones. Please come to us. So
So was that frustrating? Did you find that frustrating?
Yes. I think I have this kind of curse that I was ahead of the curve. So then you.
Right.
They're
like, why doesn't anybody else see this? I see it. It's so clear. So it sounds like when there was that gap of like understanding, or this gap due to the lack of sort of like accumulated, wisdom or knowledge or something, it really was a question of not trying to convince somebody that ethics matter, but rather trying to find the people that already believe that ethics matter.
Right, exactly. In a way, it's still that way, right?
Well, I was going to say that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You see that too, right?
But I mean, I would imagine that the proportion of these two different populations has changed probably a lot.
Yeah, I guess, especially Germany, that they just hadn't been in enough pain yet. They hadn't seen.
You think that's what it is?
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is a big thing. I call it the paradox of prevention. I mean, we all know not eating well, smoking, not doing. We all know that. But to actually do it and thinking that. We all have this story about the 99-year-old aunt who chain smoked until
and drinks whiskey every night, right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's always, and I can tell you how many sales talks I had where people told me, "Oh no, we have this problem. We don't have this problem," and like a month later they were in the news.
Yeah.
So it's just, and it's hard. I've been digging deeper into all that psychology and behavioral science, and it's that the scientific fancy term for this is moral identity threat, and also ethical overconfidence. We all think we are good and wonderful people, and we don't want to hear it if somebody is questioning that. We get defensive. It's normal. Everybody does that. Yeah. So there are still, in terms of the whole discussion, there is these dynamics I think are still active. It won't happen to us. We are a good company. We only have good people. I mean, there is a higher level than like 20, 30 years ago. But and plus we have better argumentations today and better case studies. And I still remember in the early days, I was, as a PhD student, I was desperate scanning the papers for stories and cases that showed that ethics mattered. Now you open the paper your internet browser.
They're easy to find now.
You have no problem. Yeah, so it has arrived in the mainstream. Is it where it should be? Not quite yet.
Right. That I love that term, that ethical overconfidence. We don't have that problem, which is a funny thing to say because any company is full of people and people all have problems. You know what I'm saying? Like we've all lied, we've all done things wrong, right? Like that's not there's no perfect people walking the earth, so the likelihood of something happening is, something other than zero for sure.
Right. And plus often they don't even have systems in place to be sure that this is the case.
Yeah, exactly.
They just assume.
It's not falsified.
We don't have child labor in our supply chain. So how do you know?
How do you know? Well, there's no way we do. It's like, well, that you don't know. You're just kind of guessing.
Yeah.
But it kind of comes down to what I call kind of the other guy paradox. We always think something's going to happen to the other guy, but for literally every other person in the world, we're the other guy. So odds are it's going to happen to us. Okay, like we are the other guy. As you've seen, like. You just kind of mentioned like it's a lot more prevalent now, this way of thinking, these two different populations of those who think it matters and those who think it doesn't matter. Those have changed proportionately over the years. How do you feel like we accelerate that? So I kind of wonder, is it just a question of more people like, I think generationally,
it's important.
It's more important. So is it just a question of just kind of sitting back and letting kind of, the clock move and just kind of waiting for people who are of these generations that think that this stuff matters, just sort of ascend to these positions of power? Is that kind of the only way to kind of get there? Or are there things that we as practitioners can do that can, as I say, like turn the light bulbs on at the top? Because like if leadership doesn't believe it, if the board doesn't believe it, if CEOs and executives don't believe it, then you're kind of swimming upstream. So like, which of those do you think it is? You think it's just a waiting game, or is there a way that we can engage with the business or engage with leadership in a more kind of effective way to accelerate that conversion?
Well, definitely we don't have the time for the waiting game. And I think one crucial role is there, since we, when I started, it was a very theoretical discussion. And can there be ethics in a competitive world, and capitalism, blah, blah, blah. And that didn't help practitioners at all.
Correct. Yeah, right.
And then I still remember when I went on a research trip to the US, when was it? Early 90s again. And I told this person in the plane about my project, and he was laughing at me and said, "No, that's not possible. And even it would be nice, but even if it would, how do you manage such an immaterial topic like ethics?" And he was right in that way. And what happened is that it got hitchhiked by compliance, which is the easy part, because policies, processes, controls,
it's objective in a way. Yeah.
That's business 101, right?
Right.
And the culture part is, well, we need this stuff, sure, we need this, but it doesn't work without the culture part. And I had come up with a metaphor yesterday that it's like in gardening. Yeah, you can be kind of a compliance gardener, and you eradicate all the bad weeds, and you lose lots of pesticides.
Yeah.
Or you can take care of the quality of the soil and nurture the good flowers, so you will have automatically less. I had posted on this, and there was a gardener who said all the things that you can do to avoid it, but it takes more time.
Takes more effort.
Yeah,
but
more
also
effort.
it's a more pure environment that the plants that you want there can thrive in, to your point. Yeah.
That's the thing. So we need, and that's why I'm so passionate about using communication tools and marketing for ethics and compliance, because what we have now, it's a hard sell. It's mostly seen as a restriction. People don't like their autonomy, especially in business, being restricted. So and the ethics part is all about the positive goals. This is the company we want to be. This is how you want to show up at work. This is how you want to feel at work. So this kind of more nurturing approach that, it's not so easy to work this out. And how do you do this, right?
Yeah, totally. There's a certainty to a compliance violation, because it's binary, it's black and white. From an ethical perspective, to the extent that there's a spectrum of ethical behavior. On one end of the spectrum is like perfection, right? Fully ethical, which none of us can ever really get to. So just by its nature, because it's a little bit more amorphous, because it's a standard or an ideal that we pursue that we will never achieve just due to our sort of human nature. Right. By that fact, it's a little bit harder for folks to wrap their head around and hold on to. The metaphor I really like is kind of one of a wall. So to the extent that compliance are the bricks, right? Those are the hard things that kind of make up the wall, that sort of guide the behavior. That wall will topple over without mortar. And I think that's what the ethical piece is. The ethical fills in those gaps and can turn it into an actual wall. And it fills in those gaps between, what's articulated on a policy or what's articulated in a procedure. Sometimes those things don't articulate or capture every single sort of state of the world that someone can, come in contact with. You know what I mean? So that sort of ethical thinking, that ethical muscle, is what's going to fill in the gaps for us. And so I love that. But you said something about, this is why I really like leveraging, compliance seems to be this really kind of hard sell. There's a lot of consequences. That's sort of the stick. There seems to be a little bit more potential to animate people or activate people with respect to the carrot that is ethical behavior. And you said you really love the idea of leveraging marketing techniques. And I'm totally on that page, and I believe that as well. I think so much of our job is to influence behavior, which is all that marketing does. So I'd love to dive into that sort of marketing discussion, because to your point, I think as our profession matures, we start to come in contact with like new challenges that maybe we didn't come in contact through, with when we were like babies or toddlers, right? Now we're kind of teenagers and we're getting out into the real world, so to speak. And as we come in contact with these new challenges, there are often other departments within our organization that live in those challenges and have like achieved those, right? Like marketing, to your point, is a great example. So I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about how we can better utilize sort of marketing techniques to drive this forward in contrast to the hard sell that is compliance.
Yeah, it's, the tools are all there. Yeah, it's, the challenge is how do you brand compliance? And I'm not talking, for branding for me is a lot about inner work. So that you embody what you bring to the company. And how do you know what you bring to the company? It's not that you say, oh, I'll keep us safe and I make sure that you don't end up in jail. That doesn't motivate anyone. Fear is a bad motivator, right? So you need to, how do you know what is your value added? Well, you have to think about your audience. So that's marketing 101. It starts with them. So make it about them. Always check, is this my agenda or their agenda? And if it's not on their agenda, they will not do it. Yeah, I have teenagers to parent, and that's kind of my learning ground. If in a way for me, the compliance position resembles a lot the challenges you have in raising teenagers, because you also are trying to keep a bunch of people who have only live in the now, have a very clear incentives to what they want and what they don't want, and you want to keep them safe. And they don't believe that you're right. And that
it's like the perfect metaphor. Yeah, this is phenomenal. I didn't even think about this.
Yeah. So and the magic first step in my compliance communication model is what's going on for them. And that, I think, not doing this is at the core why we have this resistance against compliance, because you come with your ABC policy and you want to push it on people and you don't really know what's going on for them, why this is difficult to implement, why they don't understand what is written in your policy. So start with a conversation, ask them about their job and find out what's going on and how you can be a solution. So the big you probably know the big mantra, the holy trinity of marketing is, who are my target groups? What's keeping them up at night? Yeah, what are they? Whatever challenges, but especially in relation to compliance, and what is my solution to them? Yeah, you want to make their life more successful. You have to say success a lot in your emails. That's already a simple trick. But you need to prove it, how you can make their life easier and more successful. Because what people now experience compliance, that somebody comes from the outside, they don't really understand my business, and they want me to comply to regulations that don't make sense to me. Yeah.
This person doesn't know what they're talking about, and they're just trying to hold me back.
Even if it's not true, but it's an easy excuse, and you should not give them this excuse.
Well, again, in like reality, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Mm-hmm. If that's what they think, then that's the battleground, whether it's true or not. To your point, like you could have the best marketing campaign, but if it doesn't resonate with your, ideal client profile or your ideal customer profile, well, then that's a failure. That's a failure. Like it has to resonate with them, Yeah. There's a certain sort of like clarity or a certain like purity to marketing in that like the results determine whether it's successful or not, right? If you run a massive marketing campaign and you get no new sales from it, it doesn't matter how much you put into it and how thoughtful it was or how smart those marketers were or whatever research they did. If it doesn't convert, it doesn't work. And to your point, if we can have that kind of a mentality with respect to like our marketing, which is an attempt to like change behavior inside the organization, that's all we're trying to do. If it's not changing the behavior, well, then it's not working. It's not effective, clearly,
Yeah, I love that. And in a way, I think one of the reasons why compliance people have problems getting into marketing because there's this certain feeling, oh, marketing, that's just, making it fancier, having a nice logo, which is not at all a thing. For me, what we need, a kind of marketing that's actually ethical, because it shows respect to your people. You want to know about them. You really, really want to understand them and help them, and explain it to them in a way that they really get it. And that cannot be done by writing, because of paragraph X, Y, Z, you can do this, or otherwise you will be in trouble. You need to strip it down to the ethical core. Why are conflicts of interest bad? It's because it touches upon the perception of fairness of your organization. It's like you go to a party and the host only gives his best friend the best stuff and drinks.
Right.
You need to explain it with these kinds of stories so everybody gets it. Oh yeah, I wouldn't want that. So now if you have this why, then you're motivated to fill out the boring conflict of interest certification. And you can also make the conflict of interest certification look beautiful and fun to fill out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But again, it's just these little things, we just put out this report with FTI, the consulting firm, and something like, almost, 2 out of 5 respondents said that their CEO and leadership didn't understand what they did.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's wild. I mean, yeah, that to me though is an opportunity for us as practitioners to change our thinking a little bit. I just, I'm more new to this industry than you are. And I'd love to hear your kind of perspective on this, because you've seen so much change, right? You're saying in the early 90s, it was hard to find someone who could fog a mirror that believed that ethics matters. Now you open the newspaper and you see a lot more of these stories. It's a lot, it occupies a bigger area in the broad sort of social consciousness, right? So it's definitely moved. I'd love your perspective on how
to win your leadership. Yeah, that's of course an all-time favorite. I had a whole session on this in my Compliance Cappuccino Club last year, and you mostly hear stories of frustration. And I think it's important to move away from, our leaders don't understand it. So it's kind of blaming them.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, trying, so what's going on for them? Why do they not get it? Because they have too much on their plate. They never had experiences in this area. What I've seen a lot in executive coaching is that they are very reluctant to talk about ethics because they have the impression, and I guess it is a little bit in the media like this, if you as a CEO talk about ethics or even about a personal story about this, they are afraid to look weak, and because you have to be, it shows vulnerability to talk about this. Yeah, so I did one executive team coaching, and we wanted to have stories from the leadership team about something where they experience why I think the question was, what's the most important issue in your code of conduct for you? And the one top executive shared that for him, work security is super important because his grandfather had very bad hearing when he was a kid, because he had worked in a very loud factory and had ruined his hearing. And he was very reluctant. He said, can I really say this? It's so personal. And this was pure gold, of course, because this really
it's so vulnerable. It's so authentic.
Fear.
Yeah.
So this fear, because I have a good friend. She shared with me the story that she once brought up ethics in an executive meeting, and the big boss said to her, "We don't talk about emotions here, little lady." And
Yikes.
so it is. But years ago, I think that wouldn't happen anymore. But it shows you that I think it's still there, this impression that ethics has something to do with emotions. I'm a tough guy CEO. I don't talk about this.
We don't have time for that. We're talking dollars and cents. We're not talking emotions here.
And it's, so I really would like, and I don't really see this in the media to show that ethical leadership is a big success factor and that it is something sexy.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. But, it's like what we all value seems to change a little bit. Maybe in our grandfather's generation, it was just the stiff upper lip and, just strength only. I think people are always going to be attracted to strength because, we're human beings. But also it seems like it's moved a little bit toward like also valuing authenticity and also valuing, I have found in my own life this like paradox of like vulnerability that it's scary to be vulnerable for sure. But I have found that like when I can, muster up the courage to be vulnerable to, a team or something like that, it ends up leading to so much like more rich interaction, right? Definitely. People feel like they can be authentic, they can be more real, we can get more candid and transparent. And, they say courage is not like the absence of fear. It's like taking action in spite of the fear. And so I think like that's really the human experience. The human experience is we're constantly bombarded with temptations and challenges and, situations that are, difficult for us. And, the resilience of humanity is overcoming those things in spite of the challenges. And I think when we act when we as leaders, whatever, when we act as if, well, we don't have those issues. I'm never nervous before I give a speech. I'm never nervous before these things. Then I think it creates this like false separation that's actually selfish for a leader because they're trying to show something that they're actually not. And they're trying to show a picture of like, hey, this is how you dance through life. And it's like, well, this person's crying in their car, or this person, hasn't talked to their wife in weeks, or their kids won't speak to them. Like,
yeah, I think that's super important because what is strength actually? And you need, as you said, you need strength and courage to be vulnerable. And I think we have a kind of a change in how we think about power, and we have to move away from this hierarchy anyways. So we might as well do it quickly. But it's difficult because this. Another friend of mine shared this sentence: "Nobody has their shit together." We are all scared.
Correct.
So, and that's super important for leadership. That because the traditional leadership code is that you have to be strong and you're perfect and you never admit that you did something wrong, which has a certain truth to it, because you can say, I would like to do this if Martin Luther King would have said so. Maybe I have this faint idea instead of I have a dream.
Right.
It would not have created this kind of momentum, right? And another sentence that resonates a lot here is leadership is just the ability not to show your fear. And you have to do that in a way if you want to get people out of a dangerous situation. I once was skiing with my boys when they were little, and we came out of the restaurant and you couldn't see a thing. It was so foggy. But we still had to go up the hill and down. And I was scared shitless. But I told to my boys, no problem. I know exactly where we need to go. I had no clue.
Yeah.
And, oh, you're great. Oh, my God. Yeah, we're almost there. And I got them out, because if I was there, that doesn't work. And
Good point.
Thing is that, you need to kind of calibrate these two sides of leadership. So when is the time to be vulnerable and open up the conversation? Yeah. If you say, hey, I don't really know what to do here, that's also key if you want to have a speak up culture. Because if you always pretend this would never happen to me, nobody will come to you and say, oh, I think I messed up here.
Right. And I think the ability for a leader to reinforce that behavior is really critical. People have been talking about speak up for the last 20 years. Yeah. And yet, like, if you look at kind of the industry benchmark, the major industry benchmark reports, those numbers are flat. They're flat year after year. The level of speak up across an organization, absolutely flat. ECI came out with this data that showed that since 2013, from 2013 to 2023, the percentage of respondents who replied in the affirmative that they live and they work in an ethical culture has been between 60 and 61% consistently over the last 10 plus years. So I'm just saying our speak up rates are flat. That line is flat. I mean, 13 years is a long time. I'm not saying it's just 13 months, 13 years. Okay. So what do you think about that? And how do we get that unstuck? How do we hit a tipping point? Because like things go little by little, then all at once. That's how everything grows, right? You plant some bamboo and for years it looks like nothing's happening. Well, that root system is going and then it shoots up, 9 feet in a single year, right? So like, how do we get this thing unstuck and how, because it feels to me like we're kind of hitting this tipping point into like a new era in this space. It feels like kind of after COVID, it feels like, we had the Great Resignation and we had so many people changing jobs and this new sort of push from the workforce that they want to work in an ethical company. The cost of changing jobs is lower than it's ever been. So there's so much more labor mobility now that it seems like this thing is, it just seems like we're in a new chapter. It would be a tragedy and a travesty if people like you and me can't get our industry to bend that curve up a little bit more. Like how many reports do you think there are in an organization? There's probably 50 or 60 reports per 100 in terms of, because there's some events that multiple people witness. So when we're talking about 1.5 reports per 100, there's orders of magnitude more like risk intelligence in the organization. When, only 60% of respondents have sort of, given that affirmative answer, and that has not changed in 10 years or 12 years, whatever it is, people have, I feel like some people are getting disheartened by that and they're starting to kind of question like, oh, do we really matter for the business? And I think we as human beings are like, we're hope machines. We like run on hope. You know what I mean? And so when we start to lose hope, then that changes our outlook and that changes our perspective and that changes our output and ultimately our outcomes. You know what I mean? And I think if we start taking our eye off the ball at this super critical time, there is a chance that this doesn't accelerate at the pace it has accelerated over the last 20 years or something like that. So I'd love to talk about how we can get that unstuck and what we need to do to like maintain that hope in the face of flat lines on speak up and flat lines on, whether folks believe that they're living in a, culture of integrity.
Yeah, I'm sometimes also a little bit frustrated with the progress we have not made yet.
Yeah.
So for Speak Up, I think the big problem is that we are kind of stuck with the perception that it's a logistical problem where you just need the right technology where people can report anonymously but if you don't have a culture where I can ask my boss, hey, where does this bottle of champagne on your desk come from? Then people will not trust the speak up line either. So we need to work on the culture first. And I've seen also with clients that had a scandal and then a kind of a first reaction to save the day is, oh, let's finally have the speak up line. But if you do this on top of a rotten system, nobody will well, it's kind of neat in the press, but we did something very serious now.
Yeah. Well, it's fake, to your point. It's yet another Band-Aid on a broken arm,
Right. So and working on a speak up culture is tough because we have never learned to have respectful conversations about moral violations or whatever sensitive or uncomfortable truth. And that goes, the good news is that this goes far beyond compliance, because behind every missed deadline or every broken project is something where somebody didn't listen well.
Right.
So the first step is actually not, oh, we have this helpline where people can, in desperation, if they don't know what to do anymore,
break glass in case of emergency.
Break, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And ruin their life and their career because they are kind of catapulted out of it because they are the ones who use the emergency brake. We need to start with listening better and show again and again. And that's a leadership task. That's not easy because we don't want to hear this stuff. We want to hear, we are great, wonderful, it's a great project, blah, blah, blah. So we need to teach leaders, and we have never learned this in our upbringing, to say, hey, I noticed that, what's going on? What can we do about it? Because there are the techniques are out there, big time, but they're not really in the compliance field yet.
Yeah, it's like compliance seems to like lag behind other departments in terms of their adoption of new technologies that can actually drive the outcomes that they're looking for. Why do you think that is? Do you think that's a budget constraint issue? Do you think it's a personality type issue within this space that we're just so risk averse, we're not willing to embrace new things until they're more well proven? Why are we always kind of lagging behind the pack, does it seem?
Well, I guess it's a dynamic. So it started that how can we nail this pudding of ethics on the wall? So we start with processes, and then you're into this world, and it's easy. That keeps you busy, and there's a new regulation, and DOJ said something, so that kind of already is tough to keep up with, and it distracts you from the stuff you should actually be doing to not be so frustrated with this other part. And then I don't want to blame lawyers. I have big respect for people who went through this gruesome and tough education, but what I see a lot is that they have this thinking, which somehow comes natural with this education. We have a law, we don't have a problem. So that there is this huge gap between we have a rule and what is the actual behavior, what do people actually do?
Exactly.
And how can we enforce or even motivate this? Is missing. Not with all lawyers, but there is this tendency.
Yeah, it's like a general tendency of this kind of influence, and I kind of call it like thinking in should. Well, I have a rule, so people should behave this way, and it's like, yeah, they should, but they don't. You know what I'm saying? I have a code of conduct. People should follow that code of conduct. There's a law out there, and I've rolled that out. I've rolled a training out to everybody, so everyone should know about it, and everybody should follow that. And it's like, well, they don't. So that's like we can't get. Should creates a false confidence, to your point.
Exactly.
I've already said that we shouldn't have child labor in our there's no child labor in our supply chain. Well, how do you know? Well, we have a policy. Well, it's like, well, there's no confidence in that policy because people don't necessarily color within the lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's almost like a magical thinking, and that if you put something in paper, then it automatically goes into the real world. It's not like when I had kids, my voice changed in some way that now whenever I speak, people just follow me. They just listen to everything I say. They don't. You have to constantly reinforce it, and you have to constantly try to get them back in line, to your point from before. I was really excited. My son just turned 12. So I was like, oh man, it's crazy. He's getting older. And then now I'm seeing like what's coming down the pike. I'm going to be turning into a compliance officer parent, Yeah, I have a blog post on this on my website.
Oh, do you? All right, I'll check that out. So on that, where can people find you? Where can they interact with you? You're such a fresh voice in this space, and your energy is contagious. I'm going to leave this conversation feeling like I got a real shot in the arm, because there's so much opportunity in this space. There's so much opportunity for us to change our cultures. As you said, there's so much work left to be done. It's kind of like when someone is like grossly overweight, someone can lose 100 pounds in a month. They can lose 100 pounds in 90 days or something if you're overweight enough, when you start getting down to a very low body fat, it's hard to lose, a tremendous amount of weight. So I'm just saying there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to make some small tweaks to what we're doing that are going to have a disproportionate impact. And you're somebody that's really kind of driving our industry forward. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about what you're working on right now, where people can interact with you more and just get some more of your energy.
Yeah, well, I'm always on LinkedIn. It's more or less my canteen where I hang out a lot. Then there is my Compliance Cappuccino Club, which is my newsletter where I send out interesting stuff on my 3 core topics: ethical leadership, speak up culture, and compliance communication. I will be at the SCCE conference in Lisbon in March.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are you speaking?
Else? Yes, I'm
speaking?
speaking. I'm speaking on how to create compliance edicts with a friend who is a compliance officer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. That's going to
Yeah.
be a good session, it sounds like.
Yeah, we just worked on it. It's very exciting. We will show how to react to objections and resistance from business teams, because there is a great tool out there in sales, which is called objection handling.
Yep.
And I tweaked it to apply it for compliance, and it's gold. I love it.
I'm working on a present. You know, we do these webinars every week. I'm working on a presentation for those webinars on applying sales stuff to compliance, because so much of it is influence. And to your point, sales has built a muscle and is defined by a set of actions and movements, I guess, that really drive influence. And there's a lot we can, to your point, borrow from that, because salespeople are hitting resistance all the time. Salespeople are trying to influence and persuade someone to do something different. And that's really what the core of our job is. It's not like, most companies have a program now. Most companies have something in place to at least pay lip service to this topic that we spent the last hour talking about.
Yeah. You really need to sell it. And I'm a big fan of Dan Pink, who wrote this amazing book, Selling is Human.
Yes, I love that book. We gave that away at a conference recently. Yeah,
great. Good idea. Everybody, every compliance person should read that book.
Well, we're all in sales. And if we can't wrap our head around that, then we're never going to be a black belt compliance officer. We're never going to be a black belt ethics professional if we can't really absorb behavioral science and influence techniques and sales techniques, because those objections that people bring to a sales conversation, that's just a human reaction to something that they're not comfortable with. It happens with our kids. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. And that's the opportunity to find out what they really care about and and be innovative and creative about it. But I've seen when I talk to my clients and compliance people there, and I mean, like everybody, we have this reluctance because sales reminds us of the sleazy used car salesman that wants to push stuff on
manipulative.
That's the problem. So turning this around and see that it's something to create meaningful relationships, being connected to your purpose, being of service. So you have to reframe your image of selling first.
Yeah. And, what's interesting is that people don't have a problem. Like lawyers have a really bad reputation, right? Like many lawyers, right? Sleazy lawyers, snakes, all that kind of stuff. And yet it's a very noble profession at its core. And there's a lot of really noble people in it. And I think when you're in the legal field or you're legal field adjacent, it's easy to make that distinction. When you're not interacting with sales a lot, it's easy to let that stereotype color that entire field and say, well, I don't want anything to do with that field. That is so sleazy. In my opinion, yes, there's a lot of sleazy salespeople, but sales is a really noble profession, because if you're doing it right, you're focused on the other person. You're not selling snake oil to somebody. You're solving their real problem. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, okay, fine. But the focus is on helping. The focus is on, making your prospect's life better. And if it works, cool. And so I think it's a very noble profession. I think when it's done right, it solves a lot of problems. It's like the core driver of every economy in the world, and I think if we can overcome the stereotype that we might kind of have on that whole group from a distance, we can start to really embrace some of the things that they do really well when it's done in a pure way, and allow us to really accelerate our impact within the organization. But again, to your point, it's going to take us kind of developing new skills and doing things differently if we're going to change the outcome. If we're going to ever bend that curve of speak up, or we're going to bend the curve of, people who believe that they're living in a culture of integrity.
Exactly. Yeah. Makes ethical selling sexy. It's probably the formula.
I love it. That's a book right there. Ethics is sexy. Maybe that's the book, Yeah. Well, Dr. Bettina, thank you so much for coming on. Really love your work. Love everything you do for our industry. And, this conversation was a long time coming. So it was really fun to get to know you a little bit today.
We had a tragic challenge in between, right?
That's right. We did. That's right.
Yeah, I think it was the night before you had your accident.
You're right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. That's right. I forgot about that. Well, I'm glad we finally did it. And I'm glad I'm not in Yeah,
That's
in a hospital bed,
Yeah,
Well, it's
you've
great.
been very brave.
Thank you so much. All right, well, it's great to see you. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye bye.
Bye.